Catherine O'Hara, a woman whose face had brought comfort, laughter and familiarity to generations, was gone. For many people, it didn't feel real. She had always felt permanent, the kind of presence you assume will always be there, even when you're not watching. Reports confirmed that she passed away following a brief illness. Fans revisited old scenes. Co-stars shared short, emotional messages. And across social media, one name kept coming up again and again: Macaulay Culkin. To the public, they were mother and son in Home Alone. To each other, it was something deeper. A bond formed during childhood fame, pressure, and vulnerability. For years, Macaulay Culkin had spoken warmly about Catherine O'Hara, often crediting her with being a source of calm and protection when his life was anything but stable. After her death, people waited. And when he did break his silence, his words weren't long. They weren't polished. But they carried the weight of decades, and they shocked people. Catherine O'Hara lived most of her life in the public eye, but she guarded her private world carefully. Even in her later years, she continued working, appearing energized, sharp, and fully present in everything she did. That's part of why the news of her passing felt so sudden to so many people. According to those close to her, Catherine had been dealing with health challenges quietly. She did not turn her illness into a public narrative. There were no social media updates, no interviews framed around sympathy. She chose privacy, something she had earned after decades of giving so much of herself to audiences. In her final months, she reportedly spent more time at home, surrounded by family and close friends. People who knew her described the period not as tragic, but calm. She remained herself, observant, gentle, and humorous in small moments. Even near the end, she was more concerned about others than herself. There was no dramatic final appearance, no farewell tour. Catherine O'Hara exited the world the same way she often lived in it, without spectacle. When the confirmation came, it didn't come with details meant to satisfy curiosity. Just the acknowledgement that she had passed, and that her family requested space. That restraint mattered. It reminded people that behind the characters she played was a real woman who valued dignity over attention. As news spread, fans revisited scenes that now felt different. Moments where she played warmth, panic, love, or reassurance. Lines that once felt funny suddenly felt tender. And one performance in particular stood out more than any other. Her role as the frantic but loving mother searching for her child in Home Alone. Because for one person, that role had never fully ended. And while the world mourned Catherine O'Hara the actress, somewhere quietly, Macaulay Culkin was mourning Catherine O'Hara the person. The woman who had stood beside him during the most overwhelming years of his life. When Home Alone began filming, it was supposed to be just another studio project. A family comedy built around slapstick, chaos, and holiday charm. For most of the adults on set, it was a job. For an 8-year-old boy suddenly carrying the weight of an entire film, it was something else entirely. That boy was Macaulay Culkin. From the very first days of production, it was clear he wasn't just acting, he was holding the movie. Cameras followed him constantly. Crew members adjusted schedules around him. Executives watched closely. And with that attention came pressure most children never experience. That's where Catherine O'Hara entered his life. She wasn't just cast as his on-screen mother. On set, she noticed things others didn't. The long hours. The repetition. The way fame arrived faster than understanding. While many adults treated Macaulay as a professional asset, Catherine treated him like a child who needed steadiness. Crew members later recalled how she stayed close between takes. How she talked to him normally, not as a prodigy, not as a brand, but as a kid. No performance voice. No industry distance. Just presence. Their chemistry on screen wasn't manufactured. The frantic worry in her character's eyes, the desperation, the guilt, the love, came naturally because Catherine cared. And Macaulay felt it. He responded not with technique, but trust. During a time when his life was rapidly becoming unfamiliar, Catherine became familiar. She explained things patiently. She shielded him from unnecessary tension. She made the set feel less like a workplace and more like somewhere safe. As Home Alone exploded into a cultural phenomenon, the world saw a funny, fearless child actor. What it didn't see was how overwhelming that overnight fame became. Interviews piled up. Expectations grew. Adults argued over his future. But on set, Catherine remained constant. When they reunited for Home Alone 2, the bond hadn't faded, it had deepened. By then, Macaulay was more aware of his surroundings, more aware of how strange his life had become. Catherine adjusted accordingly. She didn't cling to authority. She adapted, offering support without control. Years later, Macaulay would reflect on those sets not as chaotic or stressful, but strangely comforting. He rarely spoke about many adults from that era with warmth, but when Catherine's name came up, his tone always changed. Because to him, Home Alone wasn't just a movie about being left behind. It was a place where someone noticed him. A place where someone looked out for him. A place where someone treated him like he mattered, not for his fame, but for who he was. And that foundation would shape how he remembered her for the rest of his life, long after the cameras stopped rolling. By the early 1990s, Macaulay Culkin was no longer just a successful child actor. He was a global phenomenon. His face was everywhere: movie posters, magazine covers, talk shows, commercials. Adults argued over contracts. Studios competed for his time. And the line between childhood and work blurred almost completely. For a kid that young, the attention wasn't flattering, it was overwhelming. What made this period especially difficult was that very few people around him were focused on him as a person. Most conversations revolved around schedules, money, performance, and expectations. And while many meant well, few truly understood what it felt like to be a child whose mistakes, moods, and exhaustion were all on public display. Catherine O'Hara understood. She never tried to replace anyone in his life, never positioned herself as something official. Instead, she became something quieter and more powerful, a steady adult presence who expected nothing from him except honesty and effort. On set and off, she spoke to him in a way that made space for uncertainty. She didn't rush him. She didn't dismiss his fears as childish. At a time when fame was teaching him that love was conditional, based on success, performance, or likability, Catherine showed him something different. Her care wasn't tied to box office numbers. Her patience didn't disappear when things got hard. And her approval didn't need applause. People close to the production later said that when Macaulay struggled, Catherine was often the one who noticed first. Not because she was watching him closely, but because she was paying attention in the way only someone who genuinely cares does. She sensed when he needed space. When he needed reassurance. When he needed to be reminded that he was still just a kid. As the pressure on him intensified, so did her protectiveness, not in a dramatic way, but in small, everyday choices. Sitting near him. Speaking up when things felt off. Creating moments of normalcy in an environment that rarely allowed it. Years later, when Macaulay spoke about his childhood, he was often honest about how confusing and painful parts of it were. And in those reflections, Catherine's presence stood out, not as a savior, but as a reminder that kindness existed in an industry that often forgot it. For him, she wasn't just someone he worked with. She was proof that someone saw him when the world only saw a role. As Macaulay Culkin stepped away from acting and the noise of his early fame began to fade, many relationships from that era quietly disappeared. That's the nature of Hollywood: intense closeness followed by sudden distance. People move on. Lives change. Calls stop coming. But Catherine O'Hara didn't vanish from his world. Their relationship evolved, but it never disappeared. They didn't need constant contact or public displays of affection to stay connected. It was the kind of bond that didn't require maintenance, it simply existed. When they crossed paths again, the comfort returned naturally, without explanation. Over the years, Macaulay occasionally spoke about her in interviews, always with a softness that contrasted sharply with how he spoke about many other figures from his childhood. He described her as warm, grounding, and deeply genuine. Not flashy. Not performative. Just real. Catherine, for her part, never claimed credit. She never framed herself as instrumental to his survival or success. She spoke of him with pride, but also with restraint, respecting his boundaries and his adulthood. As Macaulay rebuilt his life on his own terms, stepping away from the spotlight and redefining who he wanted to be, Catherine remained someone he could trust. Not for advice on fame, but for perspective on life. On balance. On staying human in an industry that often rewards detachment. When they reunited publicly years later, fans immediately noticed the ease between them. The shared laughter. The unspoken understanding. It wasn't nostalgia, it was familiarity. The kind that only forms when people have seen each other at vulnerable moments. So when Catherine O'Hara passed away, Macaulay didn't rush to speak. Because grief like that doesn't look for an audience. He didn't owe the world words right away. He owed himself time. Time to process the loss of someone who had been there when he needed steadiness the most. Someone who had walked beside him quietly, without expectation, through the loudest years of his life. And when he finally did speak, it became clear why his silence had mattered. Because what he had lost wasn't just a co-star. It was a constant. It was a safe place. It was someone who never stopped caring, even when the cameras did. In the days following Catherine O'Hara's death, something felt noticeably absent. Tributes poured in from everywhere. Directors, co-stars, comedians, and younger actors shared memories. Short messages, photos, lines of dialogue that suddenly carried new meaning. Fans revisited old interviews. Clips from Home Alone spread again, this time with a different kind of emotion attached to them. But Macaulay Culkin said nothing.
No post. No statement. No quick acknowledgement.
For someone who had spoken so openly about Catherine's importance in his life, the silence felt heavy. People didn't criticize it, instead, they worried about it. Because those who understood their bond knew that this wasn't indifference.
It was grief.
Close friends later explained that Macaulay had withdrawn completely for a period of time. He didn't want to react publicly before he had processed the loss privately. Catherine wasn't just another colleague to mourn in a few sentences. She represented an entire era of his life, one filled with pressure, confusion, and rare moments of safety. Social media, however, doesn't wait. Speculation began almost immediately. Some assumed he was struggling. Others believed he was preparing something deeply personal. And some simply recognized the truth, that certain losses take longer to speak about, because words feel inadequate. For Macaulay, Catherine's death reopened memories he hadn't visited in years.
Childhood moments.
Long days on set. Conversations that were never recorded. Encouragement given quietly, without cameras or headlines. The longer he stayed silent, the clearer it became that when he did speak, it wouldn't be casual. It wouldn't be performative.
It wouldn't be written for applause. It would be honest.
And that made people wait. When Macaulay Culkin finally broke his silence, he didn't speak as a former child star. He didn't speak as a celebrity. He spoke as someone who had lost a person who mattered deeply to him. Instead of focusing on her fame or achievements, he spoke about how Catherine made him feel safe, understood, protected. He acknowledged that during a time in his life when everything felt unstable, she was one of the few constants he could rely on. What shocked people wasn't the emotion, it was the vulnerability. Macaulay admitted that Catherine wasn't just someone from his past. She was someone whose presence continued to guide him long after they stopped working together. He credited her with teaching him kindness without obligation, discipline without cruelty, and care without expectation. He simply told the truth, that losing her felt like losing a part of his foundation. One line in particular stood out to fans. Not because it was poetic, but because it was devastatingly real. He said that Catherine believed in him during a time when he didn't fully understand himself, and that belief stayed with him longer than fame ever did. People expected a tribute. What they got was a confession. His words reframed their relationship in the public eye. This wasn't just about a beloved actress passing away. It was about how quiet acts of kindness can shape someone's entire life, and how those acts are often invisible until the person who gave them is gone. By the time he finished speaking, the reaction was immediate. Fans described his message as heartbreaking not because it was sad, but because it felt familiar. Because many people saw themselves in it, remembering someone who protected them once, long ago, without ever asking for recognition. And in that moment, it became clear why Macaulay Culkin's silence had lasted so long. Some goodbyes don't come quickly.
They come carefully.
What stayed with people wasn't how sad Macaulay Culkin's words were, it was how specific they felt. He didn't speak in generalities. He didn't say Catherine O'Hara was kind or talented in the usual way tributes do. He talked about moments. About tone. About how she treated him when nobody was watching. That specificity is what made his message land so deeply. One part of what he shared quietly changed how fans looked back at their relationship. He admitted that as a child, he didn't fully understand what she was doing for him at the time. Only later, as an adult, and especially as a parent himself, did he realize how intentional her care had been. That realization shocked people. Because it reframed Catherine not just as a warm co-star, but as someone who chose to step in emotionally when it wasn't required of her. She wasn't responsible for him. She wasn't obligated to protect him. She simply did. Macaulay acknowledged that during the most confusing years of his life, when attention felt suffocating and trust was hard to place, Catherine gave him something rare, emotional consistency. She didn't change when success grew. She didn't disappear when things got messy. She stayed the same. Fans reacted strongly to that honesty. Many said it reminded them of someone in their own lives, a teacher, a relative, a family friend, who showed up quietly and shaped them forever without asking for recognition. What truly stunned people was how Macaulay described the loss. He didn't frame it as losing someone from the past. He spoke as if he had lost someone who was still present in his life, someone whose influence was ongoing. That's what made his words heartbreaking. Because it wasn't nostalgia speaking. It was gratitude mixed with grief. And it felt unfinished. Catherine O'Hara's legacy isn't defined only by the role she played or the award she earned. Those things matter, but they're not what people held onto most after she was gone. What lingered were stories like Macaulay Culkin's. Stories about how she made people feel seen. How she created safety in spaces that rarely offered it. How she gave kindness without turning it into a performance. Her influence lived in people, not headlines. For Macaulay, her impact didn't end with her passing. It showed up in how he spoke about parenting. In how he approached work later in life. In how he valued calm over chaos, and authenticity over attention. The lessons she gave him weren't dramatic, they were practical, human, and lasting. That's why his reaction resonated so strongly. It wasn't about losing a celebrity. It was about losing a guide. Catherine O'Hara represented something rare in Hollywood: steadiness without ego, warmth without condition, care without control. And through the people she quietly shaped, that legacy continues. In the end, Macaulay Culkin didn't shock people by revealing a secret. He shocked them by revealing a truth. That sometimes, the people who change us most never ask for credit. And sometimes, we only understand what they gave us when they're gone. That's what made his words feel so heavy. And that's why this goodbye mattered.